July 25, 1943, 2:47 in the afternoon. The summer sun hangs bright and merciless over Hamburg, Germany's second-largest city, its light glinting off the Elbe River as it winds through the sprawling port. Along the Reeperbahn, dock workers pause their labor to wipe sweat from their brows. In the residential districts of Hammerbrook and Barmbek, housewives hang laundry in small courtyards, white sheets billowing in the warm breeze. Children play in the shadows of five-story apartment buildings, their laughter echoing off brick walls that have stood since before the Great War. The air smells of salt water, industrial smoke, and fresh bread from corner bakeries. In the cloudless sky above, nothing moves except seagulls circling the harbor cranes. It is an ordinary summer afternoon in the third year of total war. And then, from the southwest, comes a sound that will shatter everything these people understand about warfare itself, a distant thunder that grows and grows until the very air begins to vibrate with its approach. They appear first as dark specks against a brilliant blue, so many that some observers will later say the sky itself seemed to darken. 91 Boeing B-17 flying fortresses, flying in tight combat box formations at 24,000 feet, their aluminum fuselages blazing in the sunlight, like moving stars. Behind them, another wave, and another. 123 aircraft in total, each one carrying 4 tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs in its belly. They do not come under cover of darkness, as the British Lancasters and Halifaxes have done for 3 years. They do not sneak across the North Sea in the protective embrace of night, scattering and weaving to confuse the defenses. They come in broad daylight, in formations so precise it looks like a military parade in the sky, as if daring every flak battery, every Luftwaffe fighter, every instrument of the Third Reich's vaunted air defense network to do its worst. On the ground, air raid sirens begin their familiar wail. But the sound that follows is entirely unfamiliar. The deep, relentless drone of hundreds of American radial engines, so loud it drowns out the sirens themselves, so overwhelming that people clap their hands over their ears and still feel the sound in their chests, in their bones, in the very fillings of their teeth. For the German defenders of Hamburg, this moment represents the collision of 2 incompatible realities. For 3 years, they have been told by their leaders, by their newspapers, by Dr. Goebbels' radio broadcasts, that the Americans are soft people, a mongrel nation of jazz musicians and gangsters, of profit-seekers without ideology or will. A nation that can barely organize itself to fight, much less sustain a bombing campaign against the industrial heart of the Reich. When the first American 8th Air Force bombers began operating from England in 1942, Luftwaffe pilots returned from intercepts with reports their commanders initially dismissed as exaggeration or cowardice. The American bombers flew in formations so tight they created interlocking fields of defensive fire. They pressed on through fighter attacks that would have scattered British formations. They maintained their bombing runs even while burning, even while men fell from shattered fuselages without parachutes. The crews who flew these missions were not supermen. Intelligence reports confirmed this. They were farm boys from Iowa, mechanics from Detroit, college students from California, pulled from civilian life and given 6 months of training. By all reasonable German military logic, such men should not possess the discipline, the fanaticism, the ideological fervor required for daylight precision bombing. And yet here they are, wave after wave, their formations geometrically perfect, flying straight into the teeth of Hamburg's defenses, as if those defenses do not exist at all. What the German military command has failed to understand, what they will not fully comprehend until it is far too late, is that American airmen fight for something their ideology cannot adequately categorize. These young men, most of them barely 20 years old, have not been forged in the furnaces of party rallies or racial theory or promises of Lebensraum. They fight from a different calculus entirely, one rooted in industrial abundance, technical confidence, and a pragmatic belief that overwhelming material superiority can substitute for ideological fervor. The average B-17 crewman has grown up in a nation where even working-class families own automobiles, where high schools offer aviation clubs, where teenagers can take flying lessons at county airports for a few dollars. They have been raised in a culture that worships engineering solutions, that believes any problem can be solved with enough resources, enough organization, enough mass-produced precision. When they volunteered for the Army Air Forces, and the vast majority did volunteer, they did so not to die for abstract principles, but with the genuine expectation that American technology and American production would bring them home alive. The B-17 itself embodies this philosophy. Its name, Flying Fortress, speaks to the American faith in defensive firepower, in armor, in redundant systems. Each aircraft bristles with 13 Browning .50 caliber machine guns. Each is equipped with supercharged engines that can carry it above most flak. Each contains enough instrumentation that its pilots joke about needing an engineering degree just to start the engines. The men who fly these machines do not think of themselves as expendable fanatics. They think of themselves as skilled technicians conducting a dangerous job with professional competence. But professional competence means nothing if the bombs miss their targets, and here is where Hamburg's defenders expect American arrogance to meet German reality. Precision daylight bombing sounds impressive in Washington briefing rooms. In practice, over a target defended by hundreds of 88mm flak guns and squadrons of Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, while your aircraft bucks and shudders through explosive concussions, while black smoke puffs bracket your position with iron fragments, while Bf-109s make head-on passes with cannon shells that can tear a wing off. In practice, the whole theory should collapse into chaos. The Luftwaffe has studied the early American raids carefully. The 8th Air Force claims precision, but their bomb patterns scatter across miles. They aim for specific factories, but hit residential districts. They promise surgical strikes, but deliver random destruction little different from the area bombing the RAF conducts at night. Hamburg's defenders know this. The city's extensive civil defense network, 40,000 auxiliary firefighters, underground shelters that can accommodate hundreds of thousands, redundant water systems, carefully organized evacuation procedures, has been built to survive exactly this kind of assault. The Americans will come, they will drop their bombs in a rough approximation of their targets, and Hamburg will endure, as it has endured British raids, as all German cities endure, through discipline and preparation and the will to victory. The first bombs fall at 2:54 p.m. The lead bombardier, a 23-year-old first lieutenant from Pennsylvania, who flew crop dusters before the war, peers through his Norden bomb sight at an altitude where oxygen must be breathed through a mask and the temperature hovers at 40 degrees below zero. The Norden sight is a mechanical marvel, a collection of gears and gyroscopes and mirrors that can calculate the exact release point accounting for altitude, airspeed, wind drift, and the ballistic trajectory of a 2,000-pound bomb. It costs more than a house in most American cities. The bombardier has trained on this instrument for months, practicing on targets in the Arizona desert, learning to compensate for every variable, absorbing the quasi-religious doctrine that precision bombing can cripple an enemy's war industry without the indiscriminate slaughter of area attacks. Through the sight's optics, he can see the Blohm and Voss shipyards with crystalline clarity, the massive construction slips, the administrative buildings, the warehouses filled with submarine parts. He can see individual cranes, individual rail cars. His right hand rests on the bomb release, his eye pressed to the rubber eyepiece. Around him, the aircraft shakes as flak bursts open the sky into black flowers of shrapnel. To his left, a B-17 from a formation's low element takes a direct hit, its fuselage crumpling like paper, as 4 tons of explosives detonate sympathetically, sending a ball of orange fire blooming in the perfect afternoon. He does not look up. His entire universe has contracted to the crosshairs centered on a building 800 feet long, to the delicate adjustments of a bomb site's control wheels, to the moment when mathematics and reality converge. Bombs away. The B-17 lurches upward as 4 tons of weight drops from its belly. Behind it, every aircraft in the formation releases simultaneously, a doctrine called bombing on the leader that creates a concentrated pattern. The bombardier has one job, to put his bombs in a precise location. The 30 aircraft in his formation have one job, to put their bombs in the same precise location. 120 tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs begin their 40-second fall through the summer air. On the ground, observers in the flakturm, the massive concrete flak towers that bristle with anti-aircraft guns, watch through binoculars with a mixture of professional assessment and growing disbelief. The bomb pattern is not scattered, is not random. It does not spray across kilometers of cityscape as previous American raids have done. The bombs fall in a tight ellipse perhaps 400 meters long, and that ellipse is centered exactly, precisely, impossibly on the Blohm and Voss shipyard complex. The first impacts blow construction slip number 3 into twisted wreckage, hurling a 70-ton steel crane 200 meters through the air. The next wave destroys the main administrative building, and with it, the irreplaceable engineering blueprints for Type XXI submarine modifications. The third wave ignites petroleum storage tanks that send pillars of black smoke 3,000 feet into the air. When the dust and smoke clear enough for damage assessment, German observers will confirm that roughly 70% of the bombs dropped fell within the target area. 70%. In broad daylight, through intense flak, under fighter attack. It should not be possible. By every principle of German military experience, it should not be possible. But this is only the first wave. Before Hamburg's defenders can fully comprehend what has happened to the shipyards, another formation appears, 52 B-17s targeting the Howeltswerft Deutsche Werft yards across the river. Then another wave, 31 aircraft aiming for the Klockner aircraft engine factory. The raids do not come in the sprawling, hours-long streams of British night bombing, where aircraft arrive individually over a period of hours, allowing time for firefighting, for damage control, for the civil defense network to respond. The American formations hit their targets within minutes of each other, overwhelming the city's ability to respond, turning different districts into separate infernos simultaneously. And the precision, the damnable, impossible precision, means that every bomb contributes to the destruction of a specific target. There is no waste, no random falling of ordnance into empty fields or residential areas far from industry. Each bomb is a hammer blow aimed at a specific point on Hamburg's industrial anatomy. The Klockner factory, which produces BMW 801 radial engines for Focke-Wulf fighters, takes 46 direct hits in a 3-minute span. 7 months of production capacity vanishes in the time it takes to smoke a cigarette. The factory's director, a committed party member who has exceeded every production quota, who has driven his workers to exhaustion in service of the fatherland, stands in a bomb shelter beneath his administrative building and listens to his life's work disintegrate above his head. When he emerges into daylight, he finds his factory transformed into a landscape from some medieval vision of hell. Furnaces split open, their molten contents spreading across factory floors, cranes collapsed across production lines, the roof gone entirely, revealing the internal wreckage to the sunny sky. He has spent 3 years hearing that American industry is overrated, that American workers lack the discipline of German craftsmen, that the 8th Air Force is a propaganda fiction maintained by Jewish-controlled newspapers. He stands in the ruins of undeniable reality and understands, perhaps for the first time, that everything he has been told is a lie. For the Luftwaffe fighter pilots who scramble to intercept the American formations, the experience carries its own revelation. Hauptmann Hans Joachim Jabs, a veteran ace with 43 confirmed kills, many of them British bombers shot down during night missions, leads a staffel of Bf 109 GSXs up through the smoke and chaos. He has destroyed enough RAF bombers to understand their tactics intimately. They fly in loose streams, they weave and corkscrew. When attacked, their gunners panic and spray fire wildly. The American formations appear different even from a distance. They fly in combat boxes stacked vertically, each box containing 18 to 21 aircraft arranged so that their defensive guns can support each other. Jabs has attacked such formations before and learned bloody lessons. Attack from behind, and you face the concentrated fire of 50 heavy machine guns. Attack from the side, and 24 guns track your approach. The Americans have calculated optimal fields of fire and engineered their tactics around mathematical principles. But Jabs is a resourceful pilot. He positions his fighters for a head-on attack, the brief moment when the B-17's defensive firepower is weakest, when only 2 guns can bear directly forward, when the overtaking speed gives gunners almost no time to track. His staffel dives from altitude, building speed, each fighter aiming for a different bomber in the formation's lead element. At a combined closing speed of over 500 miles per hour, Jabs centers his reflector sight on the nose of a B-17, his finger tensing on the firing button for his 20mm cannon and dual 13mm machine guns. The moment feels familiar, the same calculations, the same muscle memory that has kept him alive through 3 years of combat. The B-17 does not waver. It does not break formation. It does not take evasive action. It flies straight and level as if Jabs does not exist, as if the laws of survival instinct do not apply. At 400 meters, Jabs opens fire. His cannon shells walk up toward the bomber's nose. At 300 meters, he sees his rounds striking, sparks from the aluminum skin, pieces of metal spinning away. At 200 meters, he expects the bomber to break, to flinch, to do anything except continue flying straight toward him like a machine indifferent to its own destruction. At 100 meters, he realizes he has made a terrible miscalculation. The American crew has accepted that they might die in the next 3 seconds, and they have decided that their bomb run is more important than their lives. The B-17's forward guns open fire, 2.50 caliber machine guns, a pittance compared to the defensive armament facing other directions, but at this range, any hit is catastrophic. Jabs brakes left with a violence that nearly blacks him out, his fighter screaming past the bomber with meters to spare. Behind him, one of his wingmen is less fortunate. The American gunners track him through the pass, and .50 caliber rounds, each one nearly as long as a man's forearm, each one capable of punching through engine blocks, tear into his Messerschmitt's wing root. The fighter comes apart in midair, fuel and hydraulic fluid igniting, the pilot barely visible inside the cockpit before the whole machine tumbles into a smoking crater on the city's outskirts. Jabs pulls back up to altitude, his hands shaking with adrenaline, and watches the B-17 formations continue their bombing runs as if nothing has happened. One engine on the bomber, he hit his trailing smoke, but stays in formation, maintains its bombing run, releases its ordnance with the rest of its group. Only after the bombs fall does it turn away, limping toward England on 3 engines, its crew choosing mission completion over survival. This, Jabs realizes, is not the behavior of soft American boys. This is fanaticism of a different kind, fanaticism born not from ideology, but from something more unsettling. They believe, absolutely, that their technology and their tactics will carry them through. And watching another formation arrive, pristine and geometrically perfect, he begins to suspect they might be right. The afternoon stretches into early evening. By 5 p.m., the last American formation has turned for home, leaving Hamburg burning behind them. The smoke rising from the shipyards, the factories, the warehouses can be seen from 40 miles away, a pillar of darkness visible from the North Sea coast. The raid has lasted just over 2 hours from first alarm to all clear. In that time, 123 heavy bombers have dropped 480 tons of ordnance with a precision that will be confirmed days later when reconnaissance photos are analyzed. The Blohm and Voss yards, 71% destruction of facilities, 3 Type 9 submarines damaged beyond repair, 5 months of production lost. The Deutsche Werft yards, 63% destruction, 2 Type 7 submarines destroyed on their slips. The Klockner engine plant, 82% destruction, effectively removed from production for the remainder of 1943. For the entire raid, the 8th Air Force loses 19 aircraft, 15% of the attacking force, within acceptable loss parameters for a strategic target. 99 bombers returned to their bases in England, their crews climbing down from aircraft riddled with flak holes, exhausted and hollow-eyed, but already scheduled for another mission in 48 hours. The machine does not pause. The machine does not mourn. The machine processes losses as acceptable data points and continues operating. For Hamburg's military garrison, the evening brings a strange, hollow shock. Oberst Friedrich Ritter, commander of the city's anti-aircraft defenses, sits in his command bunker reviewing engagement reports that don't make sense. His batteries fired an estimated 15,000 shells during the raid. The Flakturm 4 tower alone expended its entire ready ammunition, over 2,000 rounds of 88mm and 128mm shells. Observers confirmed multiple hits on American aircraft. They watched bombers fall out of formation trailing fire. They calculated an attrition rate that should have devastated the attacking force. And yet, the bombing accuracy suggests that the Americans achieved near-perfect target acquisition. How? In what universe does a bombing force take 15% casualties and still deliver such precise strikes? Ritter has spent 30 years in the Wehrmacht. He served in the Great War, earned his Iron Cross in the trenches at Verdun. He helped develop the Reich's air defense doctrine in the 1930s, working from the assumption that any nation attempting daylight bombing against prepared defenses would suffer catastrophic losses. Acceptable doctrine states that sustained losses of 5% will degrade a bombing campaign's effectiveness. 10% will make it unsustainable. 15% should break the attacking force's will. Yet the Americans return to England and prepare for the next mission, as if 15% losses are merely the cost of doing business. The economic calculation is staggering. Each B-17 costs approximately $200,000. The Americans lost over $3 million worth of aircraft today. Each trained aircrew requires a year to train and represents an enormous investment in time and resources. The Americans lost 193 trained aircrewmen today, men who will not return to bomb Hamburg again. By any rational measure, This should represent an unsustainable defeat for the 8th Air Force. But the reconnaissance photos on Ritter's desk tell a different story. The destruction is real. The precision is undeniable. And the intelligence reports suggest that hundreds more B-17s are arriving in England every week, an industrial river that shows no sign of diminishing. Among the civilian population, the evening brings a different kind of reckoning. Frau Ingrid Bachmann, a widow whose husband died in Russia the previous winter, emerges from a shelter in the Rothenburg-Sort district to find her apartment building still standing, but every window shattered, the interior coated in brick dust and debris. She has survived British night raids before the terror, the darkness, the random falling of bombs that might land anywhere. This afternoon was different. The bombs came in daylight, while children were still in streets, while people were at work. The attack was not random. The shipyards are destroyed. She can see the fires from her window, smell the petroleum smoke. The engine factory is destroyed. The specific targets of Hamburg's war industry have been surgically removed from a city. And the Americans did it in broad daylight, as if daring the Luftwaffe to stop them. In her kitchen, she finds her radio still functional, its dial glowing in the gathering dusk. She turns it on, expecting to hear Dr. Goebbels' voice, expecting explanations, reassurances, the familiar promises that the Reich's vengeance weapons will soon punish the terror flyers, that final victory remains certain. Instead, she hears martial music, the same recorded symphonies that play between official announcements. No explanation is offered for what happened this afternoon. No acknowledgement that American bombers flew over Hamburg in formation, in daylight, and destroyed what they aimed to destroy. In Hamburg, the winter of 1944 brings a cold that seems to penetrate deeper than any previous winter. The destroyed buildings offer no protection from the wind that howls off the North Sea. The survivors, those who have not evacuated, huddle in makeshift shelters, burning furniture for warmth, surviving on rations that grow smaller each month. Frau Bachmann, the widow, has aged years in months. She no longer listens for air raid sirens with fear. Fear requires the energy to hope for survival, and that energy is long exhausted. When the sirens sound, she simply waits. Sometimes the bombers come. Sometimes they target other cities. It no longer matters. The city she knew is gone. The life she lived before the war exists only in memory. And the contrails continue to appear in the sky. White lines drawn by machines flying at altitudes beyond human survival, manifestations of an industrial power so vast it can casually waste fuel, creating visible markers of its presence. She thinks sometimes about the men who fly those bombers. She has been told they are criminals, terror flyers who deliberately target civilians. But the evidence before her eyes suggests otherwise. The Americans bomb the shipyards, the factories, the rail yards, the infrastructure of war. The civilians die because they live near these targets, because modern warfare makes no clean distinction between soldier and citizen. She does not hate these distant men. She cannot summon the energy for hate. She simply exists in the ruins of what was once a great city and waits for the war to end. The epilogue writes itself in smoke and steel, in production statistics and targeting assessments. The daylight precision bombing of Hamburg in July 1943 is not the largest raid of the war, nor the most destructive. Operation Gemara as a whole kills more civilians through firestorms than through precision attacks. But the daylight raids represent something more significant than tonnage of bombs or casualty figures. They represent the moment when German military leadership understood, with undeniable clarity, that the war was lost. Not immediately. The fighting would continue for 2 more years, consuming millions more lives. But the fundamental equation had shifted. Germany was fighting enemies who possessed superior resources, superior production, and the ability to apply those advantages with systematic precision. The Americans proved that daylight bombing was possible, that formations could survive losses that should have been catastrophic, that precision could be maintained under conditions that should have made it impossible. They prove these things not through superior ideology or fighting spirit, but through engineering, organization, and the overwhelming application of industrial resources. The B-17s that flattened Hamburg's shipyards were not wonder weapons. They were mass-produced machines, flown by ordinary men, maintained by logistics networks that stretched across oceans. But in aggregate, they achieved what no amount of martial virtue could counter, the systematic dismantling of an industrial state's capacity to wage war. The symbolic object that recurs through this transformation is not a weapon, but an instrument of measurement, the Norden bomb sight with its 2,000 precision parts, its classified gyroscopes, its mechanical calculation of depth delivered from 5 miles above the earth. It represents a philosophy of warfare alien to German military thinking. It says, "We will not out-sacrifice you. We will not prove ideological superiority through fanaticism. We will simply apply superior technology and superior resources until victory becomes mathematically inevitable." The sight costs more than many families earn in a lifetime, and the Americans install one in every bomber, accepting that some will be lost, trusting in production to replace them. This casual abundance, this pragmatic application of overwhelming resources, proves more devastating than any ideological fervor. The Germans built a military doctrine around fighting spirit, individual prowess, and the will to victory. The Americans built a military doctrine around statistics, production quotas, and acceptable loss rates. In the skies above Hamburg, these philosophies met, and abundance crushed ideology with the weight of 10,000 tons of precisely delivered bombs. In the end, what stunned German troops about the American daylight bombing was not the courage of the air crews, though that was real. It was not the precision of the bombing, though that was unprecedented. It was the revelation that courage and precision could be mass-produced, standardized, and applied systematically across hundreds of bombers, thousands of sorties, month after month, without pause. The Americans did not fight like fanatics. They fought like engineers solving a problem, accepting losses as data points, adjusting tactics based on results, and trusting that their industrial base could sustain any level of attrition long enough to achieve objectives. This approach, mechanical, statistical, seemingly devoid of the martial virtues the Wehrmacht had spent a decade cultivating, proved overwhelmingly effective. Hamburg's destruction was not an ending but a proof of concept, demonstration that American industrial power could be weaponized with precision, that abundance could be transformed into a military advantage impossible to counter. The white contrails faded from a summer sky, but they left behind a truth written in burning steel and shattered concrete. In modern industrial warfare, the nation that can produce, sustain, and replace faster than the enemy can destroy holds an advantage no amount of fighting spirit can overcome. The men who flew the bombers were not supermen. The machines they flew were not invincible. But together, supported by an industrial infrastructure continental in scale, they represented a form of military power the Third Reich had no answer for. And in the ruins of Hamburg shipyards, in the smoke rising from precision bomb factories, in the contrails scratched across the summer sky, perceptive observers could read the future. Not a future determined by ideology or racial destiny or willpower, but a future determined by mathematics, by production statistics, by the grinding, inexorable logic of industrial attrition. The bombers came in daylight. They came in formation. They destroyed what they aimed to destroy. And they would keep coming until nothing remained but rubble and memory, until the illusions died with the cities, until even the most fervent believer understood that this war would not be won through superiority of spirit, but lost through inferiority of resources. This was the truth that stunned German defenders more than any bomb, the revelation that they were fighting an enemy who had reduced warfare to an engineering problem, and possessed the industrial capacity to solve it, no matter the cost, no matter the time required, no matter the sacrifice. Abundance, it turned out, was its own ideology, and it spoke with the thunder of 10,000 radial engines drowning out every promise, every certainty, every lie that had sustained the Reich's ambitions. In the end, the Norden bomb sight calculated more than bombing trajectories. It calculated the future, and the future fell with geometric precision on Hamburg shipyards, factory by factory, target by target, mission after mission, until calculation became reality, and the sky filled with contrails pointing toward inevitable defeat.